Welcome back, everyone. Today we will be reading chapter 23, so let's get into it. Quentin hugged him so hard that Elliot spilled his whiskey down his front, which he complained about loudly, but Quentin didn't care. He had to make sure Elliot was real and solid. It made no sense that he was here, but thank God he was. Quentin had had enough of sadness and horror and futility for one day. He needed a friend. Somebody who knew him from the old days. And seeing Elliot here, out of the blue, for no reason whatsoever, felt like proof that impossible things were still possible. He needed that too. "It's good to see you," he said. "You too." "You met Plum?" "Yes, charming girl. I assume you're—" "No," Quentin said. "Not even?" "No." Elliot shook his head sadly. "I can see I came not a minute too soon." They stayed up late, filling each other in on everything that had happened. Then they slept late and drank too much coffee and went over it all again. Elliot's news brought Quentin up short and sharp. Whether or not he was in it, whether or not he could see it or touch it, he'd thought there would always be a Fillory out there somewhere. He loved knowing it was there. It anchored his sense of happiness, the way a distant stockpile of gold might underwrite the value of a paper bill. It was inconceivably sad to think of it ending. And where would they all go? All the people and animals and everything else. What would happen to them? "But you think there might be something here that could save it?" he said. "Something Rupert had?" Elliot paced around the living room in circles. Plum and Quentin sat on separate couches watching him. While they slept, he'd been up even later, going through Rupert's notebook. He'd been excited at first when he realized that his search had convened with theirs. He'd come to Earth on a quest, and his best friend had already done it for him, but he'd gone back to being frustrated. Maybe it was the knife. But what would I do with it? Who would I stab with it? I never know who to stab, but I don't know what to do with the spell either. "It's not for reviving a dead land," Quentin said. "It's for making somewhere new." There must be something else in that manuscript then. A clue or something? And why would the bird want it? As urgent as this was, Quentin's mind was still with Alice upstairs. Part of him wanted to snap into hero mode to leap to Fillory's defense, but saving Fillory was Elliot's business now. It was hard to admit it, but it was true. He would do what he could, but right now his job was Alice. "But so Martin made his deal with Umber?" Elliot said finally. "I thought Umber was good. And then didn't Martin kill Umber?" "He still could have," Quentin said. "The classic double cross." Or maybe Umber's still alive somewhere. Maybe we're just supposed to think he's dead. "Ooh, I like that one," Plum said. "How do you even know Martin's killed Umber? God, I still can't believe I'm talking about them like they're real people, or animals, or gods, or whatever." "Ember told Jane Chatwin," Quentin said. "Jane told me, but you're right. Maybe this is all Umber's fault. Maybe he's the hidden hand or hoof or whatever behind the apocalypse." "But why?" Elliot rubbed his face with both hands. "Why would he do that? How can he be alive? Where's he been all this time? How can he be evil? What is he Umber's evil twin? It's a bit of a cliche, even for Fillory." Buckets of sunlight were pouring over-enthusiastically in through the bay windows. It was claustrophobic in the house. Quentin hadn't been outside for days. As tired as he'd been, he hadn't slept well the night before. It was hard knowing that Alice was right there, burning, always burning, with just a thin slip of world between them. He wondered if Alice ever slept. He didn't think she did. And Castle Blackspire? Elliot was getting more and more animated. What's that? It screws up the entire structure? What does it end? Where does it end? Umber's got to be the key. One way or the other. Got to. That must be the clue Jane wanted us to find. Coming to the end of his caffeine fit, he dropped bonelessly into a vinyl armchair. I'm going to send a message to Janet. She should know about this. You can do that? Send a message to Fillory? It's not easy. Kind of like a very expensive telegram, but yeah. RHIP. Let's talk about something else. What have you learned about your dead girlfriend? She's not dead, Quentin said. Bzzz. Elliot pressed an imaginary game show button on the arm of the chair. The answer I was looking for was, she's not my girlfriend. She's a crazy magic rage demon. Maybe you should just take the land apart. Scrub it out. Cut your losses. What? With Alice inside? Well, she'll survive, probably. You can't kill those things. She'll just go back where she came from. But she's still alive, Elliot. And she's right there. Right there! If there was ever going to be a chance to change her back, this is it. Quentin. Don't Quentin me. Now he was the one getting animated. This is what I'm doing. What I have to do. You're saving Fillory. I'm doing this. Quentin, look at me. Elliot sat up. You're right. If there was ever a chance, this would be it. But there isn't a chance. That's not Alice. Alice is already dead. She died 7 years ago, and you can't bring her back. I went to the underworld. She wasn't there. You didn't see her, but that doesn't mean she wasn't there. We've been over this, Quentin. I could really use your help. Fillory needs your help, and I hate to be crass. You know I do. But Alice is one person. We're talking about Fillory. All of it. The entire land. Thousands of people. Plus a lot of cute animals. I know. They were wasting time. He had to get back upstairs. I know. But I have to try. What's your plan up there? Plum said. I don't know. Run around some more, cast some more spells. Maybe I'll stumble on something. Trial and error. Plum tapped her lips with one finger. Not my place, but it sounds to me like you're a little stuck. I am stuck. It sounds to me, she said, like you're dicking around, sneaking, dodging, avoiding confrontation. I'm not disagreeing with you. I just don't know what else to do. Against my better judgment, Plum said, I'm going to give you the benefit of a woman's perspective on this one. I'm so excited to see where this is going, Elliot said. I can't even tell you. Keep talking. What I mean is, meet her head on. Stand and fight. Quit sneaking around. See what happens. I tried that. I lost. It sounds to me like you tried hiding behind like 90 shields, Plum said. That shit probably just pissed her off even more, and from what I've seen, she was already plenty pissed. You know what makes people angry? When they're trying to tell you something and you're not hearing them. Then they feel like they have to get louder and louder and louder, and then you're still not listening. You're just getting all scared. Because it's fucking scary. She wants you to stand and face her, Quentin. What I'm talking about is walking in there and dealing with her. You want her to be a person again. Try treating her like one. Quentin shook his head. That's suicide. Is it? It sounds to me like a relationship. You're being glib, he said. Am I? Why hasn't she killed you yet? A heavy silence fell in the room. The trouble was that she was right. However Alice got here, it wasn't an accident. He'd tried to make a land and it hadn't worked. He'd wanted to create something, make something new, be somebody new. But it was becoming apparent that he couldn't. Not until he'd dealt with something old. Not until he'd cleared his debts and laid his ghosts to rest. The way he really knew Plum was right was that it was what Alice would have done. "I still think you should scrub it out," Elliot said, obviously disappointed. "Fresh beginning? Start over?" "I have a feeling," Plum said, "that it's a little bit late in the day to start over." Back in the fourth-floor workroom, Quentin opened the red door again. He was starting to hate the sight of his land. It was a stillborn thing. He'd meant to make something fresh and real, and instead he'd produced this cold, sterile photocopy. Something had gone wrong, and more he was starting to think that the problem was him. He sat down at the work table and started at his notes, thinking about what Plum had said and waiting for some kind of signal to emerge out of the noise. Should he just walk in, stand there, look her in the eye? Maybe he should. There she was, right there in the doorframe, watching him as if she knew what he was thinking. "I'm here," he said. "Alice, it's time we talked. It's time we figured this out." She floated there, free-falling in place, staring right through him. Something was missing. If they were going to talk, and if it was going to count, it should be here, in the real world, not the copy. He wanted to bring her through, to force her out into the open, onto his ground. It would be a terrible risk. A Niffen in lower Manhattan. If he lost control, he could be looking at a magical September 11th. But you could talk yourself out of anything. "Come here." Could she? "Come out here. Let's finish this." Faint smile, but nothing more. Alice couldn't or wouldn't come through on her own. That meant he had to help her. He began with a series of erasures and banishments and anti-magic attacks, each one more powerful and violent than the next, but the land was tougher than it looked. They didn't scratch it. It wasn't going that easily, not without a fight. He changed tacks. He picked up his staff, his lovely black wood and silver staff. It took 5 tries, whacking it against the brick pillars in the workroom, but he broke it in the middle and then twisted apart the 2 halves. And even then, the land persisted. Alice looked like she was enjoying the show. Maybe this wasn't a question of brute force. He walked up to the threshold and stood 6 inches away. Closing his eyes, he willed the land to go away. He imagined it giving up, surrendering its existence, letting its cold substance dissolve as if it had never been. It never should have been. It didn't want to be. Let go. Yes. He opened his eyes. "Out, brief candle," he said, and blew softly, 1 puff. The mirror house collapsed from the outside in. There was a moment of silence. Quentin imagined the cold, sandy outskirts dispersing outside, the raining streetlights ceasing to be. Then came a distant bang as the lower floors began contracting like an accordion. Quentin backed up as far as the doorway. Alice looked over her shoulder. If a Niffen could disbelief, there was disbelief on her face. Then the banging came closer, and finally the room behind her shut like a trash compactor, and she was shoved rudely through the doorway into reality. When she turned to face him again, there was a new seriousness of purpose on her face. She wasn't playing anymore either. Quentin called down the stairwell. "Guys? Plum?" Alice smiled at him as if to say, "Sure, go on and call your little girlfriend." "It's not like that." As she passed the table, her fingers brushed it and it began to burn. He backed down the stairs gingerly, never taking his eyes off her, as if she were a wild animal. "Plum?" he called. "Elliot? Alice is out. I collapsed the land and she came through." He heard Plum stir in her room. "What?" She opened her door in a sweatshirt, hair loose, and saw Alice at the top of the stairs. She must have been taking a nap. "Oh, Was that a good idea? Probably, Elliot. Where was the high fucking king? What was weird was Quentin wasn't afraid. Usually in moments of crisis, he was lost in a swarm of choices, paralyzed by the possibility that he might do the wrong thing. There were so many wrong things to do and so few right ones. But not this time. This time, the through line was clear to him. There was only one right option, and it could be fatal, but death would be preferable to a life spent doing either the wrong thing or nothing at all. Plum, get behind me. She did, for a wonder, and together they retreated downstairs to the living room, where he tried to stall Alice by blocking off the doorway. Kinetic magic. Crude, but he had to try it. He threw together a barrier out of books, dishes from the kitchen, the pillows from the sofa, whatever he could get a magical grip on. But she passed right through them, and where she touched them, they burned. "Quentin," Plum said, "this is my house, that I own. Don't break it." She put the fires out, but the air smelled like burning insulation. "Plum, you have to get out of here," he said quietly. "Find Elliot and go." Whatever he was going to do, he couldn't do it if he was worrying about Plum, too. He couldn't hold back, and his control wasn't going to be good. In fact, if he was lucky, his control would be really, really bad. It was going to end here one way or the other. He was going to fix Alice, or he was going to die trying. She died for him once already. He couldn't do any less for her. An experiment. He brought his hands together, laced his fingers, and all the electrical cords in the room made for Alice like striking snakes. It was a trick he couldn't have pulled off before his father had died, but he carried that extra strength with him now. Current flowed, the lights browned out, and Alice's blue aura flickered. Quentin smelled melting plastic. Alice slitted her eyes with pleasure. What next? He'd already tried magic missiles. A magnetic cage, maybe? No. Just force then. Wands, shields, thick invisible layers of power, one after the other, like he'd done when he was working on the page, wrapping around her and then contracting and then having the next one wrapped around it. Light refracted and bent around Alice, producing incidental distortions and rainbows. The spells shed little orbital sparks and streamers. He felt her pushing, probably with a tiny fraction of her strength, but she hadn't burst through yet. The mere fact that she felt resistance was progress. Maybe it was love or courage or the plastic fumes, but Quentin felt strength building up in him, a rising, cresting flood of it. He'd felt this way once before in Fillory, on Benedict Island, and even farther back, that first night at Breakbills, when it had all come tearing out of him for the first time. But he was even stronger now. It felt good. Not much time left. Thank God the building was already warded up tight, because he could feel the energy in the room pressing at the walls, bulging them outward, threatening to blow out the windows. Alice shoved harder at the envelope of force, frowning. His eyes flicked around the room for anything metal, found the bare steel frame of the couch, jerked it to him with a magnetic spell. Amping up his strength, toughening his hands, he bent it into the shape of an arch with 2 feet, an omega. He was almost too late. Like tearing tissue paper, Alice was through her prison and on him. Her blue hands gripped the sigil just above his, but she couldn't get past. Their faces were close together now. She was smiling as usual, showing her perfect sapphire teeth, as if she could barely keep from laughing her head off. Quentin smiled back. This, at last, was right. He was meeting her head on, like Plum said. Strength to strength, he braced one leg behind him. No more skulking around in shadow worlds. This was real. He could feel the power of her, the buzz and snap of it. Could she feel him too? God, it was a relief to let go, to completely lose his shit and give it everything he had, and find out once and for all if it was enough. "Is that all, Alice?" he asked. "Is that it? I want more. Give me everything." The metal glowed red and white around their hands now. Instead of shielding his own hands, he made them metal, too. He borrowed the steel of the couch frame and drew it into them. They started to glow as he dumped more and more of his precious energy into keeping the ward going and keeping himself from catching on fire. He was going to beat this thing, this magical abomination that had Alice trapped inside it. He was going to pry it open and pull her out like the jaws of fucking life. His magician's sixth sense warned him just as the balance shifted. This thing was going critical. His Omega was steel, but at the end of the day it was only a couch frame, and he was asking more of it than it had to give. He managed one last shield, this one just around himself, then he let go. The metal glyph exploded into vapor in Alice's hands. The blast pushed them apart. He skidded backward a few feet across the living room floor. He let it all drop. His shield evaporated. His hands and arms were flesh again. It was just him and her, nothing between them. Just empty air and silence and 7 years of lost time. All through the fight, he'd kept expecting himself to panic, but the panic never came, and now he knew it wouldn't. The old Quentin might have done it, but he wasn't a creature of fear anymore, jumping at his own shadow, never knowing who he was or why. When he was younger, it seemed like the only time he wasn't afraid was when he was angry. He'd been so full of fear and self-doubt, the only way he could think of to be strong was to attack the world around him. But that wasn't real strength. He understood that now. They'd both come so far to be here. He was getting a second chance, and he wasn't going to miss it. "You," she said. "I'm not the boy you used to know, Alice," he said. "Not anymore. That boy is gone. I know who I am now, but you don't know me." A great warm calm was in him, welling up out of the hidden reservoir where it had been waiting all this time. If only he'd known where to find it. Alice's eyes narrowed. She hung back, suspicious, studying him. Quentin began pulling off his shirt, started unbuttoning it, and then just tore it off. It was time to go all in. He nearly missed his chance, having decided, evidently, that Quentin was bluffing. Alice went for him, and this time she was coming to kill him. He turned away and shouted a word he hadn't heard since he was 22. He didn't know if Alice was technically a demon or not, but either way, he had an empty demon trap tattooed on his back, and he was going to use it. It was all he had left. He didn't see it happen, but there was a great inrush of air, like a giant gasping in surprise, and Alice cried out angrily, "No! No!" Then he heard the cry go up an octave and then cut off sharply. Then the room was silent, and he was alone except for drifting motes of couch fluff in the air. At the same moment, his tattoo lit up with cold fire. It was like somebody had dumped liquid nitrogen on his back. When Fogg put a cacodemon in his back the night before graduation, he'd felt nothing at all, but this wasn't nothing. This hurt, and there was pressure inside him, massive pressure. He couldn't breathe. He groaned like a woman in labor, trying to let some of it out, but it only got worse. He could feel Alice in there. He felt her rage and her power and something like ecstasy. Quentin pressed his back against the coolness of the wall to try to ease the burning, but it did nothing. He felt like his ribcage was crackling. The veins were glowing in the backs of his hands. The front door slammed open. "What did you do? Where's Alice?" Plum and Elliot were staring at him. They'd burst in ready for the fight of their lives. "And you took off your shirt," Plum added. "She's in my back," he whispered. He couldn't speak any louder. I know. He detached himself from the wall and began walking stiffly up the stairs. Sweat was starting out across his forehead, trickling down his chest. You should go, he whispered. What are you doing? Plum asked, but he couldn't even answer her. He could feel Alice stirring inside him like a genie in her lamp. She wanted out by whatever exit she could find or make. In his mind, he was putting things together, doing back-of-the-envelope calculations and then ignoring the answers when they weren't reassuring. What are you doing? Plum shouted after him. Come on, Elliot said. We have to help him. They followed him up. He couldn't stop them, and Elliot was right. He needed their help. He climbed the stairs to the fourth-floor workroom, the skin on his back sore and stretched tight like a third-degree sunburn. Coins, he whispered. Mayakovsky's. There was enough room here. The spell came to him easily, automatically, like it had worn a deep channel right down the middle of him. Even though he was casting it for the first time, he could see the page from the Netherlands in front of him in his mind, the columns of numbers, the turning orbits that spun around each other like a magician juggling rings, the plant with its long leaves rustling demurely in a wind from somewhere out of frame. He knew the whole thing by heart. Until now, he just hadn't understood why. This was what it was for. This was why he'd snatched it out of the air and saved it. Matter and magic. He'd thought it was about making matter magical, but now he had something that was pure magic, and he was going to give it matter, reverse the flow. He was going to bring Alice back into the world of the physical. He snapped out orders. There was no time to be polite, and Plum and Elliot handed him things as he called for them. Powders, liquids, books open to such and such a page. One of the gold coins. He took them without looking, like a surgeon up to his elbows in a patient. It was like he'd been assembling the pieces without knowing it. He couldn't have done it without the newfound strength, and not without minor mendings either. He knew how to knit broken things together. He scraped at his insides for every last scintilla of magical strength. He was feverish, and his knees felt like they could buckle at any moment, but his mind was clear. He knew what he had to do, if he could just stay upright long enough. When everything was complete, when the enchantment was hovering latent in the air like a thundercloud about to burst, he turned his back to the room and opened the trap. It was like letting out an enormous breath that he'd been holding for way too long. The room flooded with blue light, the light in a swimming pool on a summer afternoon. Quentin almost blacked out with relief. Later, he would look at his tattoo and find a raised, blackened scar in the center of the star. Alice's blue form was floating limp in the center of the room, on its back, listless but stirring. She wasn't smiling now, not at all. Her expression, when she focused on him, was black. She was angry, a wasp who'd been trapped in a jar and then shaken, and she was ready to sting. She was the most beautiful, terrible thing he'd ever seen, like an acetylene flame, an incandescent filament, a fallen star right in front of him. He met her gaze and held it, and spoke a word in a language so old that the linguists of the world believed it to be lost and forgotten forever. But magicians had not forgotten. Mayakovsky's coin, the second coin, flared in his hand, and he forced himself to grip it tight, even though it felt like a fistful of molten gold or dry ice. Like his fingers must be melting or blackening and curling up. Alice startled as if she'd heard a sound. Not his voice, but something else, something far off. A distant church bell tolling a dawn. Then the air around her darkened, and the world began falling into her. It had begun. The spell was pulling atoms from the room around her, Her skin darkened and became dull and opaque. She writhed as particles swarmed around her like insects, embedding themselves in her form. Matter rushed at her, crowded into her, substituting crude substance for her luminous, translucent blue flesh. Quentin stumbled back, and Plum and Elliot caught him. And together, they staggered out through the doorway. It wouldn't do to be too close, to have any of their atoms pulled into Alice. The spell would do it if it had to. The spell didn't care. Alice was convulsing now, growing heavier, condensing out of the air, being forcibly embodied. She moaned a deep agony moan, already half-human. Her Niffin light was fading. She sounded like she was dying, and for a horrific second, Quentin wondered if he'd been wrong, if he was killing her instead of saving her, but it was too late to take back. When it was finished, when the blue was all gone, Alice fell to the wooden floor with a dull smack, hard enough to bounce once and lie still. The room reeked of rarefied gases, sharp spikes in his nostrils. Alice laid sprawled on the floor on her back, her eyes closed, breathing shallowly. She was flesh again, the old Alice, human Alice, pale and real and naked. He knelt down next to her. Her eyes opened, just barely, narrowed against the light. "Quentin," she said hoarsely, "you changed your hair." That's it for this week. We'll see you guys next week with Chapter 24.